Hey there, history enthusiasts. Today we're diving into one of the most intriguing and dramatic stories in the Bible, the life of Ahithophel, a man remembered as one of the greatest counselors in Israel, whose intelligence and influence made him almost legendary, but whose fall was as dramatic as his rise. Picture the scene: a vibrant kingdom, with stone palaces, tents spread wide, soldiers marching, and at the center of it all, a king who needed to make quick and strategic decisions. In this setting, Ahithophel stands out. He wasn't a warrior. He didn't wield a sword, but his weapon was his mind. His advice was so precise that the Bible says listening to Ahithophel was like listening to the very voice of God. That alone gives you an idea of how respected this man was. Now, let's visualize Ahithophel entering the royal hall. He didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His firm gaze, his imposing posture, and that aura of wisdom made everyone pay attention. David, the king chosen by God, deeply valued Ahithophel's vision. He knew that the words of this counselor could change the course of battles and even the history of Israel. But, like every great drama, things didn't stay on the path of loyalty and harmony forever. Behind all the trust, there was a hidden resentment, something growing in Ahithophel's heart. Many scholars suggest this resentment may have been tied to something very personal. Bathsheba, David's wife, was his granddaughter. And we all know the episode where David took her as his wife after sending Uriah, her husband, to his death in battle. Imagine the weight of that for Ahithophel, his family's honor stained, the pain of seeing his granddaughter involved in a royal scandal. That detail changes everything. Because from being a loyal counselor, Ahithophel began to carry inside himself a wound that never healed. And this is where the story takes its unexpected turn. Fast forward in time, and we arrive at the moment when Absalom, David's handsome and charismatic son, rebels against his own father. A civil war is brewing, and who shows up to support Absalom? Yes, Ahithophel himself. The counselor who once stood at David's side now crosses a line and becomes one of the brains behind the rebellion. Think about the impact of that. For David, it must have been a devastating shock. It wasn't just losing an ally, but watching the man he once considered a kind of divine voice rise up against him. For Absalom, on the other hand, it was a triumph. Having Ahithophel on his side meant having in his hands one of the greatest strategists Israel had ever known. And here comes one of the most electrifying parts of the story. Ahithophel advises Absalom with sharp, surgical plans capable of defeating David in no time. The confidence he radiated was so great that Absalom barely questioned his ideas. But destiny had other plans. In the middle of this conspiracy, a crucial detail appears. God would not allow Ahithophel's advice to succeed. David, in prayer, asked that Ahithophel's counsel be confused, and that's exactly what happened. Another counselor, Hushai, infiltrates Absalom's circle pretending to be his ally, but in reality, he was working for David. And guess what? He manages to convince Absalom to ignore Ahithophel's sound advice and to choose a slower, weaker strategy instead. That was the fatal blow for Ahithophel. He realized that his counsel, once considered infallible, had been rejected. And more than that, he knew it meant the end of the rebellion. With David alive and moving strategically, Absalom's defeat was only a matter of time. And then comes the darkest ending of this narrative. Ahithophel, a man who had always controlled situations with wisdom and precision, couldn't bear to see his destiny slip from his hands. He returned to his hometown, put his household in order, arranged everything neatly, and took his own life. It's a hard scene, loaded with drama. A brilliant man, but also a wounded one, ends the story alone, defeated not only by outside events, but by the heavyweight resentment in his own choices. But what does this story teach us? Ahithophel is a complex figure, a reminder how even the wisest can be carried away by emotional wounds and the thirst for revenge. His downfall didn't come from lack of intelligence, but from a heart marked by bitterness. He had everything to be remembered only as one of the greatest counselors in Israel's history, but his name also became tied to betrayal and a tragic end. So when we think of Ahithophel, we don't just see a wise man. We see an iconic character whose life mixes genius and tragedy, loyalty and betrayal, respect and despair. It's a story that shakes us because it reminds us of something deeply human. No matter how high someone stands, the wounds of the heart, if left unhealed, can bring down even the strongest. And that's it, folks. This was the incredible, yet somber, journey of Ahithophel, a character who left his mark on the Bible not by wielding weapons, but through the power of his words and intensity of his choices. If you enjoyed this trip through time, don't forget to drop a comment. Do you think Ahithophel was just a man wounded by circumstances, or someone who let bitterness speak louder than wisdom? Until next time, explorers of history,